Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Consulting Leaders Podcast, a place where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your own practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, John Degnan. Join me as we talk with the best consultants in their niche. Today, we feature Gary Cohen, the CEO of CO2 Coaching, an executive coaching firm he founded in 2004. With over 15,000 hours of coaching experience, he works with CEOs, executive teams, and mid-market organizations, including private equity-backed firms, to improve leadership alignment, accountability, and execution. A graduate of Harvard Business School, Gary is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council and co-author of Just Ask Leadership. His work focuses on helping leaders move from permission-driven cultures to accountability-driven performance, delivering measurable business outcomes. Welcome, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, John. It's always a pleasure. Nice to be here with you and all the lovely folks listening today.
Yes. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I grew up with some really interesting, severe learning challenges, and I think they have become a blessing over the years versus the curse that I thought they were when I was younger, because I became quite the nerd of reading and learning. And it says a lot about the career that I have had. I started out of school building a business with a childhood friend, Rick Diamond, and we built a business from the two of us and $4,000 to 2,200 people, taking it public on the NASDAQ.
Wow.
I can't say that the NASDAQ experience was a great one. You learn a lot about how public companies work or should work or shouldn't work. But it was quite a ride, growing 50% compounded annually year on year for the first 10 years.
Wow. You mentioned severe learning disabilities growing up, and then you graduated from Harvard Business School. What a juxtaposition.
Right? It was, I think, like, I'm thinking back to undergrad. I finished at Minnesota. I started Tulane, and I used to get the books in the summer for the courses I was going to take in the fall because I knew I couldn't get them read and do the work of the class. So I'd read them ahead of time. And I think it's very much stayed with me, which is that I'm very rarely a just-in-time, get-it-done person. It's more, if I have to get something done, I'll work at it for some time before the due date is ready. And that, I think that has served me well. But, when you're going through it, it just feels like suffering.
One phrase you said in your website that I thought was fascinating: most obstacles are artificial, they're in your head. Clear your head.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but it sounds like something I would say. We create a lot of barriers for ourselves. We tell ourselves stories, right? Our hierarchy within a firm, like when we had 2,200 people, I still saw myself as Gary, and they saw me as the president, right? And they saw my partner as the CEO. And you have to teach yourself that that's really how you're being seen, because the noise signal ratio is off. And because it's off, you create stories in your head about like how things really are, and you get a little overconfident and the ego takes over, your humility leaves you. And you need both, right? You need both. We call that walking the ridge line at our company, which is the distance between humility and ego. But those are often our barriers, right? The barrier being the humility, you're not enough, and therefore you got to get over that. Or it's really hard to lead or to be a follower for someone who leads like that. And for the one who is like, I'm all that because look at me, look at all the decisions I've made. Oftentimes, a lot of that is luck, and that they made good fortune out of their luck, right? But once it's happened, the ego seems to take over and says, no, I'm all that. And so that means everybody else is a little less than that. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a barrier for the leaders. And a good part of the work that we do at CO2 is helping leaders find that ridgeline and stay on it. That they can both be humble, but not too humble. To have ego enough to have the energy and courage to face things that are very difficult, but not so much that they stop listening to others and believe their own stories.
Just Ask Leadership is a book you wrote. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I went to, as you mentioned, I went to Harvard. I also am a Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute, where they choose 20 leaders a year from around the world who want to go from success to significance and have an impact on the world in a different way than just economics. And while I was there, it dawned on me that asking questions was the secret. It didn't come from the program. It just came from my awareness that they were using the Socratic method there. They used the Socratic method at Harvard. My business partner and I found that at first we would ask questions to find out things and information so we'd know things. And then we wound up knowing things. And then people in our team would come to us and ask us, what should they do? The questions needed to change. They needed to change from knowing to getting other people into action and motivating them and engaging them in the work. And so that awareness hit. And so then I said, oh, this would be interesting. I should write a book on this because I'd not seen it covered. And so did my research. There were about 3 books at the time. Like QBQ was out there. Marilee Adams, I love her. She's a terrific lady. She wrote Change Your Question, Change Your Life, I think. And then one other that I'm forgetting at the moment. But, it didn't do service in my mind. They each had their gifts to that topic. But if you look up almost any other subject on leadership, you would identify that there were 1,000 books under whatever the topic was. So it seemed like there was a place to play. It's actually getting more and more crowded as a space, which I think is great. And so I went out and interviewed 100 different leaders. And I had quite a network between the schools I went to, the organizations I belonged to, and I networked. And some of them were just incredible, like Jack Chain, who was head of the Air Force at the time. So that meant the pilots, the fighter pilots, and also nuclear missiles fell under him, and people who were like the players in Omaha of the 5, like Mike Harper, and I'm forgetting the guy's name. He ran one of the biggest construction companies on the globe. And then people like Jay Peterman, from Seinfeld, but the real one. It was just terrific and great insights. And what I learned from most all of them is they stumbled onto this asking questions versus anybody specifically telling them this works. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting. And the only 2 that actually were deliberate about it was Dave McLaughlin and his son, Bill McLaughlin. And Bill and I had been friends for a long time. Bill ran Select Comfort and grew it from bankruptcy or close to the company that it was before the last leader had their effect on the business. And then he went and ran Orvis, and has had a terrific career. And his dad was like the youngest CEO of Fortune 500 at the time, which was, I think, Toro. And both of them were very deliberate in understanding that questions were the answer. But other than that, everybody else stumbled on it. And I'm like, me too. And how could we make this more deliberate for folks? And what's interesting is I'm working on a book with Robert Bedore, who was a client of mine for years and now is a coach at CO2 Coaching. And he ran the world's largest digital manufacturer. Both 3D printing, CNC machines, where you put in the CAD drawing and out comes the product. It's quite amazing. So he and I decided that we'd collaborate on this book called On the Hook. And the whole idea is it's kind of the next step in Just Ask Leadership, which is how do you get people to stay on the hook? And what we have found over time is that, and I've seen this at every one of my clients, is that somebody comes into your office and says, "Hey, John, this is what I'm thinking about doing." And you get really excited because it sounds like a great idea. So what do? You say, "Boy, that sounds like a great idea," right? You've just taken them off the hook the moment that happens. Because if it works out, they don't feel all the credit. They feel like they're just doing what the boss said. Okay, even though they came up with the idea, right? If it doesn't work out, what do you think they say? Kind of like, you thought it was a good idea, right? So either way, it takes them off the hook. And who's on the hook? You as the boss, right? So all these hooks are being dropped at your feet. And the question is, are you going to pick them up? And so what we found is the secret is it's nuance. You're going to ask a lot of questions of the person, but you're not going to lead them to an answer. You're going to leave them with, it's on them. It's their decision. It sounds like you've really thought this through, and I look forward to seeing how this turns out for you. And they get really uncomfortable because typically It's not what they're hearing. And they're like, okay, that's great. But what would you do? Because now you know what I'm going to do. What would you do? It's not my decision to make. It's yours. And in fact, your job description actually says it. We didn't even need to talk on this topic. I'm glad we did. We had a great discussion. You were able to hear the questions that I had. And it's not even for me to hear the answers to those questions. It's for you to understand them because you're on the hook for this.
Whereas 90% of the managers would probably be more directive than that.
Yeah. Much more directive. Even because if you think about it, it's a permission-seeking, permission-giving trap that they're in with each other, right? That if I give you permission, it feels good to me. It feels like I'm doing something really good. Like, wow, look at me being the manager I am, right? Versus recognizing that at that point, you're only talking about a topic. It's like an idea. It's not the outcome. Versus the person coming to your office and say, "Hey, John, look, these are the results of what we got. Wow, that's fabulous." Now you can just, praise them all day long because they know it was theirs, right? Versus, "Wow, that was really good." And in their head, they're going like, "Yeah, but I just did what you agreed to."
Right. Interesting. That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
We're going to do it as a allegory, a fable. It takes place in a ski resort. And we're going to learn the lessons as we go, because as I mentioned to you, I spend most of my time in Steamboat Springs. So I have a love of the mountain. And so I thought, what better than to write on a topic that I so enjoy?
What got you into executive coaching in the first place?
Rick and I, when we started our business so many years ago, over 40 years ago, we hired a coach. His name was John Kunz. He was formerly president of Dun & Bradstreet. He had a desire to come to Minneapolis because his son lived there, who we knew. And we cut a deal with him. And he wound up making more money than we did for the first 2 years. And it was worth every cent. We learned so much. I mean, it's hard to find somebody with so much knowledge and skill and expertise. And we were just young pups, and we knew nothing, and we were just sponges. And I always thought, wow, that's really cool. And so when I went on sabbatical from our company, I said, I wonder what's that like? And then all of a sudden, 3 people independently reached out to me. You know how the world kind of offers itself to you, and said, will you coach me? I said, I don't coach. You have a reputation for how you show up. I'm like, yeah, but I don't coach. I'll have lunch with you. No, I want to pay you. Each one, same thing. And so that's kind of how I stumbled into it. And then I was looking at getting into a business with a friend. We were in the process of raising $200 million to roll up dog kennels across the country. And I was going to be the operator. And he was going to be the money guy to raise the funds. That's the business he was in. And I just decided after years of being in a business that I didn't really care for. I loved business, but I didn't care for the business. I love dogs, but I don't love all dogs. And so I didn't want to be in that place again. And in some ways I regret it. I kind of think it's still a great idea, and it hasn't really been done yet. But I knew I was being called for this. And it really feels good to have such deep relationships with folks. We are not like the coach you hire for a executive presence. We are the coach you hire because you're looking for transformation. You're looking for moving from being the mechanism of the business, where the business has you, to being the architect where you see it and you have it, and you architect it and design it, and everything that comes back to you, you assess it and say, how would I get this to not come back to me next time? How would I not be involved in this and have the same or better outcome? And that's heavy lifting for folks, and some aren't up for that. But the ones who are, they find their life transformed because instead of every time the profit and loss statement comes out, you're not emotionally tied to its outcome, which, as you know, right, entrepreneurs typically are. And it's a journey for them. And people stick with us for years. I'd say the average it's like 2.7 years on average. But with that, we have clients been with us 12 years.
Wow.
Quite a number of them, in fact. So it kind of speaks to they're still getting value. We don't look at things like we have our own first principles because we looked at the industry and we said, do we agree with the industry? And we really don't. It developed out of therapists. And therapists my mother was a therapist. So I certainly appreciate the value therapists bring to the world, but they have a view of a patient should be healthier. And many coaches coming out of the therapeutic world have that view. And ours is we're being hired to help our clients be more effective at what they do. And sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's unhealthy. If we see it as unhealthy, we certainly name it. We don't ignore it. And sometimes they say, yeah, that's not why I hired you. Great. And if we think it's really unhealthy, we'll send them to a therapist, meaning we'll make some recommendations for them. But it's a lot cheaper going to a therapist than us, like 10x. 10x. And if you're covered by insurance, it's infinite, right? So, if that's the thing you need, that's the thing you should get, like all in. We believe that a coach does have advice to give, which is very counter our industry. Our industry says the coach is an empty vessel. They're there to move the client through the series of questions. And clearly, I love questions, right? But, you spend enough years. I've coached like 400 CEOs over the years.
Wow.
And there's some pattern recognition that you see. And we do believe that the client is the end decider. So we're not really worried about if we gave advice, because we do it with light hands. Like, we don't say, you must do, you have to do. We know that they're the decider, and they have to be the decider, or they don't get engaged in the change that needs to happen. But those are very much against the principles of the associations out there, and there's quite a number of these. I mean, we've come up with 12 principles, but we looked at the heuristics of the industry and we said, do we really agree with these? Are they foundational? And at one time they were. I mean, business was a different place when they entered, but in today's world, we think that there's a different place for the coach and how they show up and how much business experience elevates the game for the client. And I think the other coaches should keep to therapeutic things and human resource things.
Interesting. How do clients typically find you, Gary?
Most often it's referral. And what I'd say is that almost anybody in business at a senior level knows at least 3 or 4 coaches, right? So you got to really make your impression on somebody. And the best way to do that is to work with them for years. And so a lot of our work comes that way. We optimize for SEO, LLM. We do advertising on Google because we have 15 coaches in the practice who are all really talented business people turned coaches versus, kind of human folks, therapists, HR turned coaches. And it's a very different flavor of a coaching company. We look at it as there's 3 operating systems. We call it triad operating architecture. And one is the business operating system. The other is the collective operating system. And the third is the human operating system. And we believe to be effective as a coach, you really need to be pretty schooled in all 3. Because the business operating system, if you were at the most foundational level, it'd be like EOS or Pinnacle or Scaling Up, one of those. And we have no issue with those. Fine. Company needs an operating system. Most have their own operating system. But there's what's the nomenclature? What are the rules of engagement? What are the decision rights? What's the strategy, actions, and how do you track the rhythm of that? And that's the business operating system. The human operating system is, what's your identity? What happens when you're triggered? Where do you go? And how do you evolve that so that you're not triggered and that your identity is not wrapped up in the business in the way that many are. But the hardest one is the collective operating system, which really baffles everybody, which is, we have all these systems in the business operating system. Why aren't those working? Well, because you haven't created a commitment to each other in how you're going to have difficult conversations, what happens when we don't agree, how do we hold to the promises and commitments we make to one another. And that's where we find a lot of juice, right? And it's within the system of that that keeps commitments from being durable with each other. And so what happens then, it's fascinating, is that the entrepreneur gets triggered by things not being sticky or durable. And what do? They escalate, and they come in and they get frustrated and angry and whatever. And then everybody behaves like they get the things done. But then they go back and as untriggered, they apologize for how they behaved, but everything goes back to how it was. And these people now know that they are going to wait until the escalation happens, because it might be another 2 months. And so they don't have to stay on top of things. Or alternatively, the other way is they solve it with the business operating system, and they have checks on checks. It's like we have our L10 meeting in EOS. Well, people aren't coming with it done. So then what do? Oh, we need somebody to check during the week to make sure that they're getting it done. Oh, and then it doesn't get done. Well, we should have something that checks to make sure the checker, now I'm just being facetious, right, is all the way through. But what you do is, when you don't know where the problem really is, which system the problem lies, you use the system that you're most comfortable with. And for me, I used to use the human operating system. I'm really comfortable in that space. And then I'm like, it wasn't that. It was the business operating system. No, it was the collective operating system. So as coaches, now what we do is, one of our first tests is like, where is the issue? Where is it presenting itself? In which system? Because if it's in the business operating system, we would handle it one way. If it's in the human operating system, we'd handle it a different way. And if it's in the collective one, certainly a different one. And it's the hardest of them, because you're trying to get a whole bunch of humans to collaborate. And humans, in their best day, want to collaborate. And it's the gift that we have as a species is collaboration. And yet it's also the thing that seems to be a struggle for people.
You've been a guest on several podcasts. What do you think about podcasts as a marketing tool?
I think it's an interesting one. And I know that one of the ways in which we select podcasts is by how they present the transcript to people, how they get the information out there, the URL usage, and having a homepage that brings it back to us. And from that standpoint, it has two uses from our viewpoint. One use is it amplifies our credibility, and in the world of LLMs, that's important, because LLM, before it wants to state something from your website, wants to make sure that you're a legit source of information, and podcasts are a great tool to do that, whether heard or not heard, right? Because the LLM picks it up, sees that you're a guest on a show like yours, and our credibility as a firm goes up because of that. So that's one. Two is sometimes the right listener is hearing the guest, and the guest is saying the exact right thing at the right moment, and you'll get somebody to call you. That happened to us recently. A friend, colleague from Switzerland had interviewed me, and somebody from Mexico reached out because they heard our discussion on the podcast and knew that we could be helpful.
That's terrific.
Right. So there are examples of that. I'd say by and large, the first one is more trackable than because they don't always name where they heard you when people call in.
As a consultant, do you ever feel like you get stuck? There's certain obstacles or challenges that you have to overcome, and any presenting themselves right now to you?
With the client or as running the firm?
With the client.
With the client. Yes, certainly. The more you're at it, the less often it happens. Although when it does happen, it tends to be stickier, right? Because it's more rare. The nice thing about having a collaboration with 15 other coaches is that we work together, and I don't know that we actually name it well, but it's like a supervisory meeting where as a coach you say, I'm having this problem, and there's either two places, well, there's more likely three places where the problem occurs. It's you, the coach, which is you're not aware of something in you that's showing up in the work that's creating a barrier for the client, right? Or it's in the client, or it's in the environment, right? And by having such talented people to go to who aren't embedded in the relationship of the coaching, which is one of our principles, which is coaches need to be aware of their blind spots too, right? Because if we're not, then we have the ability to bring them into the relationship. And so I know for me, I will often name what I think are my issues with a client if I think they're showing up, so that the client's very well aware that I don't want to project into the relationship something that doesn't belong there.
Finally, looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunity for executive coaching and leadership development over the next few years?
I think AI, no surprise, is such a gift to it. I think there's firms out there that are really working hard, and we'll see how they do at developing an AI solution for a low-cost model. I don't think that's really the place that we're playing. We're kind of a high-cost model and very personalized relationship without fake empathy. The thing where I see it incredible, and we use it in our firm, is taking our transcripts and turning them into really interesting summaries that give insight that you couldn't just grasp as a coach, no matter how well read you are. You can find things in it. It tracks every conversation and its progress over time. So like, rather than me being like a accountability partner, which I am not for our clients, they're all high achievers. They do not need me to say, did you do? However, our notes actually go back over time and say, this item's still open, this one's closed, this one's continuing, this one's a challenge. And it's tracking past conversations to this conversation. So I think the coach who's not using AI to help in a partnership with the client, and not secretive about it at all with clients. In fact, we'll hop on calls together and use AI to problem solve something, because we know that the world information is available to us. And if we ask it in the right way, we're liable to get a much better answer. The thing is, do you know what the answer means? Which is where the coach comes in. Because if you're a skilled business person, coach, lifelong learner, you probably have read the content before. And if it's using it well or misusing it or redirecting, no fault other than it's still learning to be smarter. So I think that's going to be the game changer.
If people want to find out more about you and see what you do, where should they go?
They can look me up, GaryBCohen.com, CO2 Coaching.com are great places to find us. If you just type in CO2 Coaching, you'll find us. So any of the above.
Great conversation. Consulting leaders, another great consultant we had a chance to chat with today. Gary, thanks so much.
John, thank you. What a pleasure. Always fun to talk about things that one cares about.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.